Hi, everybody. Here is my trifold brochure for my organizational skill strategy. And the strategy that I chose to look at was using checklists and task analysis to gain organizational skills. So, if you're looking at my brochure, this would be from the outside. So, this page here is my cover page. My references would be on the back where you can see where I got all of my information. And then the first thing you'll see when you open up is why to use this strategy. So, some reasons why using checklists and task analysis works for organizational skills. Um, we have found that staying organized, managing time, and planning ahead are key skills that help students handle schoolwork successfully. So, studies show that using simple systems to track materials, plan assignments, manage homework, that this helps students build better independent habits. In 2024, there's a study on even elementary students found that this type of training reduced homework struggles and improved organization even after the lessons ended. And then lastly, more reviews also confirm that these organizational tools are especially helpful for children and teens with ADHD, which I know many of us work with students with ADHD. So can be very helpful for us. So when the brochure is flipped to the inside, you will see how to implement it, how to make the checklist work for your student, and then tips for parents and educators when creating these checklists. So, how to implement it? First, we want to choose one routine, one simple task that the student regularly struggles to complete. So, some examples are completing homework, packing a backpack, preparing for a test, completing a project, turning in assignments. And you only want to pick one of these. You don't want to do everything at a time and have checklists for everything. So we pick one and then we break the task down. So we'd write the task as short, observable action. So instead of saying study for your test, you would use these steps. Get your science notes, review pages 12 through 15, study your vocabulary words, complete practice questions, put materials back in backpack. Okay, we want to make sure that our steps are in order. So the actions are arranged from beginning to end. And then, when helpful and when applicable, you can also estimate how much time each step should take. So this can also help the student understand how much time they should be spending with each step. Then we want the student to check off each step. The student checks off each item after it's completed. And then you want to encourage the student to look at the checklist instead of relying on only memory. And at the end, you can review and adjust to make it work for your students. So you want to ask, what did I complete? Did I miss anything? Which step was difficult? Should I change the checklist next time? So when the student gets to the point that they're making their own checklist, they can kind of do some self-reflection on how to make it work better for them. So then in our middle part, I have make the checklist work, some tips to make it as successful as possible. So step one is to keep it visible. We want to put it where the students will actually see it and use it. So some common places are a planner or a homework folder, a take-home folder, a binder if it's maybe older students that use a binder to keep everything together. A desk or workspace, we can tape it right on top of that desk. Make sure it's in their backpack, or if you have a digital task system, like if they use an iPad at school, that you could have a checklist on it. We want to make sure we keep the steps small. A checklist should make the task feel more manageable and not create just another overwhelming assignment. We want to use student-friendly language to allow the student to help create or revise the checklist as well. That their input is super important. We want to be able to prompt the students, but then fade that prompt away. So at first, as a teacher, we might say, check your list. What's your next step? And as the student becomes more independent, would gradually reduce those reminders and those scaffolds so they are figuring out how to do it on their own. And this will ultimately build independence. So the goal for the student, not the adult, is to manage the organizational system. So tips for parents and educators who are wanting to implement this with their child or their student. It kind of reiterates what was talked about already, but just in a concise piece. So start small. Choose one routine rather than creating checklists for everything. Make the expectations observable. Instead of be organized, say something like, put your completed work in the homework folder. Use brief check-ins. Ask the student to show you the checklist and explain the next step rather than completing the organizational task for them. We want to reinforce independence. So notice when the student uses the checklist without being reminded. For example, you could say something like, "You checked your list and got started without a reminder." That's a great independent organization. And then again, we want to fade that support gradually. So as the routine becomes more familiar, we're going to reduce the adult prompts and allow the student to take ownership of the checklist. Thank you all for following along on my organizational strategy. And again, there are my references if you care to find out more. Thank you.